Art and Conversation Synaesthesia seminar today. We can avoid everything artsy altogether, and there can be a whole week or even a month that we have not heard a single sound of music, but you cannot go around without food for long. And every one of us, within the constraints of our budget, is an artist of our own palette. Is it much different for a gustator associate? This is what we're going to talk about today. Synesthesia and the ways it can be related to food, both cooking or eating. This seminar is special because you cannot you can hardly find a more multisensory experience than eating. I feel honored and delighted to introduce our first guest speaker, Gabriela Ruiz Lugo, Mexico City chef and restaurant owner, named the best chef of Mexico by the Mexican Gastronomic Council. Chef Gabi has synesthesia that allows her to translate music into flavors. Gabriela is originally from the Mexican state of Tabasco. Her home and family inspired her cooking with plantains, black beans, and chocolate as the main ingredients. Gabriel Ruiz created a catering service in her home, Villa Hermosa, and then opened a restaurant in Mexico City. The restaurant was chosen the best new restaurant in Mexico in 2019 by Food and Travel Magazine's Reader Awards. In 2019, W Magazine included her as 9 women leading Mexico's culture renaissance on the world stage. And she was named one of the most powerful women in Mexico by Forbes magazine the same year. Exclusively for this seminar, Gabriela and I had a very exciting and personal talk that we have agreed to show you today in a slightly abridged and edited version. Before we enjoy this, Marina, are we ready to see the video? The link is going to be in the chat box, and we're going to broadcast it right in the stream of this seminar.
Okay, so the link is in the chat already, and I'll start sharing the video now.
Te digo un secreto, a mí la música me sale y mi lengua puede saborear todos sus sonidos. Y aunque la gente pensaba que estaba loca, descubrí que la magia aparecía cuando tomaba una olla y una cuchara. Desde ese momento le prometí a cada instrumento que compartiría con el mundo su delicioso sabor.
Okay, I have, when I listen to music, I see colors and I see some shapes. Also, when I listen to music, I can taste sounds. For example, the high tones. When I listen to a high tone, I experience a sourness in my mouth, like acidity, like a lemon or vinegar or something like that when it's a high tone. When it's a down tone, I can feel bitterness in my mouth. So I mostly with music, but also with some aromas and yeah, like it's a multiple feeling, I think. One time I was making a ceviche, and I thought it was okay from the lemon. It's right, the amount of lemon and stuff. And then the client take the plate back because it says it didn't have too much acidity. So when I listened to it and there was another song that it was not with that much high tones, I realized I was having like a confusion because I was tasting that acidity and the ceviche hasn't have that acidity. My mother used to have a music school, a kid for kids, and every time I went back from school, I would tell my mother something I did at school. For example, Mom, my best friend tastes like anise and milk because of her voice and her skin. And but then I grew up and I start to have at school some people saying, what did you have, what did you smoke, or what did you have, because of all my comments. So when at the moment I knew it has a word for that, I didn't know that. I went to a neurologist because I had some problems with sleeping, and I don't remember exactly how was it, but there was like a sound, and I said something to the sound that the like the taste of that sound, and he said that's called synesthesia. He started to tell me that it was not a disease, it was like a brain condition. So that's why I start to read about James Wannerton and a lot of people that makes um, that uses this condition in their life. So at that moment, I was already a cook. I was a chef. I had a restaurant, and I decided to make like to match my profession with the synesthesia. Synesthesia um, has been changing my style of cooking. I mean, I see other things. I inspire myself, listen to a song or looking at a sunset, and when I see the sunset, I have so many combinations of flavors, so I can take that idea and have it in a plate. So I call the plate after that sunset, and when the people is reading the menu, it's like poetry. So they it's like a powerful, the synesthesia for me is like a powerful tool for my work and my career. It not depends if the artist is famous or not, if I like the music or not. It's just that sometimes the gustatory combinations doesn't make sense to me. So it's like I have to like it has to be edible to cook it. I decided to use earphones to have the music just in your ears without talking. So when I make that change, it was like connecting more the person with the food, and I start to make that gustatory shit. I have some in here. I can show you the picture later. But every part has some symbolism, and that symbolism has a taste. So the artists, because they read music, they can read the flavors. So after I have my gustatory music sheet, then I can start to make the combinations, and I make like 2 or 3 times, and I taste it with my headphones, and then I give it to the musician. It's not beautiful, I have to tell you. But here I have like all the shades. And for example, this shade, this is acidity. The acidity, it comes with like a triangle with all these pointy shapes. And then I have bitter over here that it's like a round form, but all dark. So all of them are flavors and sensations that you experience in your mouth, like spiciness, sparkling, all the sensations and flavors has a shape, and I can put that shape in the lyric of the song. I give a brief before starting with the music experience, so they can see the gustatory sheet, read it, listen, and then I bring the food, and they can. It's kind of complicated because I have to measure the the piece of the bite, so the piece of the bite matches with the seconds of the music. They do. They do. I have some artists and that they've been one of them or two of them cried one time because they said they could know themselves in a different way. And we have like a kind of connection because I'm kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like a I know them just to listen to the music, and I can tell more about them in a different way. It's like food for my soul, and I do it also for me, for satisfying myself. And since I'm doing this, I feel much better in like an anemic way. It was like a kind of therapy for me too, because I was like a content in a in a jar or something. Now I the sky is the limit and I can cook whatever I want. Right now I'm doing this project with Universal Music. They are um, they want I came up with this idea that having aromas in a music concert. One time I was using a perfume, and that perfume was the the aromas were fennel and sage, and it was very herby and like rainy aromas. And it starts to rain that same day, and I was listening to a song that the three of them were connected. So I was like, crying, and it was a lot to me, like too many emotions together. So I start to think we need to do that in one concert. Sometimes it's not that good because the like I was telling you, when I go to a concert, I end the night with an overwhelming feeling. That time when I was using that perfume, I decided now to use it in an opposite way. For example, when I see that the weather is cloudy and rainy, I don't use something herby because it's like too much feelings. Walking, looking at the rain, smelling my perfume. So I change it and I use citric perfume or floral perfume. So I feel like happy when I smell. When I was a kid, um, my friends, I had like my girlfriends because I like the taste of them. Like that girl I was telling you that my best friend tastes like milk and anise. Not necessarily, but it's something that I can't take out of my mind. One thing that I've experienced with some other friends, especially painters and musicians, is that I give them always colors. I have a big box with colors. I have it right here in front of me, and I come with them and I say, I have a song that I'm gonna cook, and I need to know the colors. I love to see the colors first and the shades. So I give a piece of shade to everybody, colors, and it's kind of crazy. But at the end of the practice, everybody comes out with the same colors and same shapes. So I thought it was synesthesia was something very personal, but in some way, in some point, we are connected. I think it is not on paper, but we all know it. For example, if you want if you want to have a menu for autumn, you're gonna have some spices. It has to be, if you have to decide between cold and warm, you're gonna take warm. If you have to decide in choosing a pairing with white wine or red wine, you're gonna get the red wine. So it's like kind of emotion, and also you choose your playlist and in that same mood, and also your plates for making your plating dish. Today, while I was taking a shower, I was listening to Danzón Número 2 de Arturo Márquez, and I was having that connection with mole, that it's a Mexican dish, but it's super dramatic combination because you have chili peppers and chocolate and spices. And so I was listening to that song, and I was thinking it would be a mole for sure, that song. Normally it is all connected. If you go to a cafe and you have this I don't know, this piece of cake and coffee, you're not going to have that meal with reggaeton, listening to reggaeton in that cafe. You're gonna have something that is connected to the plate and the in the drink. There is a lot of inspiration in eating. For example, if you are a plastic artist, you can see textures in a plate, or you can see combinations of colors, and how the plate matches with that puree and that sauce. Wow. That's a very interesting question. But when I have to eat, normally I've been cooking the whole day, and I've been smelling and tasting a lot of dishes. I take something easy and not with too much flavors, because otherwise it's too much for me. Like yesterday, I took yogurt and pineapple, only two ingredients, and that was dinner, because I was recording some TV program that I have, and I was eating the whole day a lot of things. Believe in yourself. If you feel it, do it, and say it out loud, because it's not a great. You don't have to be quiet about your feelings. Always express your feelings. Always always put names to the fruits, because I used to put names to the cherry would be Penelope, and the alichi would be Maria Luisa, because they have personality. Go for it and keep doing it, because it's one thing that you think that it's going to be wrong, maybe this is the best part of your work and of your life.
Soy directora de orquestas comestibles. Cuando lo entendí, herví las cuerdas de un violín y sellé todas las teclas del piano. Y me encanta el hecho de saber que las cosas que no se comen se pueden cocinar.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Gabriella for taking part in the seminar, for such an interesting interview. And I want to thank Anton for putting the video together and for asking such interesting questions. So unfortunately, Gabriella won't be able to join us during the discussion because she has some personal emergency. But thank you very much for taking part for this fascinating video. In the meantime, I'm going to present our second speaker. It's James Winterton. He's an artist and writer. He is also the president of the United Kingdom Synaesthesia Association and Journey Through the Senses. And he has been involved with synesthesia research for more than 20 years. He has also worked closely with food industry creatives, identifying and discussing the potential advantages and disadvantages of creating synesthetically themed advertising campaigns. He has also exhibited a number of art installations with sound to taste synesthesia at their core. Today, he will speak about his own relationship with food and eating and how his synesthesia directly impacts his eating experience. He will also address the question about synesthesia research and its impact on the culinary arts based on his own experiences dealing with the food industry. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. We are very happy to host you. So whenever you're ready, please share the screen and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Right, can you all hear me?
Yes?
Thank you very much. Yeah, well, I'd just like to say thanks for inviting me to contribute to this series of art conversation seminars. Absolutely brilliant. Been really, really good, high quality. But anyway, today I'm going to attempt to briefly explain the sort of rather complex relationship I have with food and eating. It's a relationship that's been nurtured by my own intrusive form of sound to taste synesthesia. But before that, I'd just like to address the question as to what impact synesthesia research has had on cuisine, high or low, because we've got a lot of low cuisine over here, believe you me. This is all based on my own experiences of dealing with the food industry. As we all know, there's no doubt that eating is one of the most, if not the most intense multisensory experience we can have, and we go through it many times a day. And sort of discounting raging hunger, our prior expectations, our subjective perception, and hopefully our pleasure of eating food are all driven by sensory input. Obviously they are: sight, sound, smell, taste and touch. This multi-sensory experience we all have is something the food industry is obviously well aware of and has often used it for its own advantage. And over the past 20 years, I've been approached many times by creatives from the food industry, manufacturers of yogurt, cheese, pizzas, spices, crisps, and they're all wanting help and advice on how to create advertising campaigns based around this mysterious superpower they've heard about called synesthesia. Give you some examples. I mean, I've been asked to taste London landmarks, eat stuff in a pitch black anechoic chamber. I was asked in 2005 to choose the car of the year, would you believe? It was a VW Golf GTI, by the way. I've even been asked to taste the Kandinsky, not an original, and select the England football team during the 2018 World Cup. All of this was in the name of creating a unique angle to help promote and market a new or existing food product. That was the sole aim of it. Not all, but certainly most of these approaches have inevitably led to initial disappointment from the creative's point of view. This is after I've explained that synesthesia is an involuntary, subjective and unique experience for the individual with synesthesia. And it's not something that we could easily or could easily be applied to the general population. I mean, talking about synesthesia inspired dishes, and I've created quite a few of these over the years. My ones have included flavour combinations that certainly most people would probably find quite gross. One that springs to mind is mixing Marmite and strawberry jam, which I get quite a lot of, funnily enough. It's some distinct sound that comes out of the air. I don't know where it is. But I mean, that's awful. I actually quite like it, funnily enough, because it's the textures I go for, not the actual flavours. And sort of to give you an example from my own portfolio, I suppose you'd call it, of synesthetic perceptions. Whenever I hear the word oyster, see an oyster, or articulate the word sound within my own inner speech, I get an intense, short, I'm getting it now, intense short burst of the flavour, texture, temperature and volume of a piece of very thin chocolate. And being served and eating oysters in a, say, a restaurant setting produces a full-on flavour, a mouthful of chocolate. And because it's a particularly strong one, the strength of it overpowers the real sort of briny flavour of an oyster. So, simply put, whenever I see an oyster, or whenever I eat an oyster or see an oyster, I taste chocolate. I've explained that to food creators, but we pressed ahead anyway with these projects. And I think the reason for that was I began to introduce and blend in other cross-modal correspondences with my own subjective synesthetic experiences. And that made all the difference. But while I was doing it, I was sort of asking myself, well, I did ask myself a number of times, why am I doing it when I know full well the food creative's initial vision contained flaws, major flaws? I think the primary reason for this, or the reason I went ahead with it, was to get the term synesthesia out to a wider audience anyway. I always try and do that. And another, a far more intriguing reason was I could see it was opening up all kinds of new creative thinking in the way we could present and consume food in the wider non-synesthetic world, if you like. And I suppose as sort of time went on and projects came and went, I found myself relying more and more on the subjective correspondences we all experience rather than concentrating on purely synesthetic ones. And this was just done in order to create results that the general public could relate to more readily. And that's been quite a regular habit of mine recently anyway. Because I've sort of become to think of synesthesia as being, I suppose, a cousin, a close cousin of cross-modality, even though the scientific definition certainly appears to me to view synesthesia as being part of the cross-modal correspondence family. So, a question I'd like to, I'm going to ask myself and come up with what I think is the answer, but I'd like to know other people's opinions. Are there differences between cross-modal correspondences and synesthetic associations in the food experience? I'm asking that because from my own perspective, I think they are different. And the reason for that is the cross-modal correspondences are experiences I have to apply a degree of thought to. Experiences such as, associating sweet taste with rounded shapes or perceiving the colour black as being bitter rather than sweet. And I think to counteract that, certainly my synesthetic experiences, they tend to be automatic, usually very specific and very detailed, and this is the important point, far more intense and personal than its cross-modal equivalent, I suppose. So how have the chefs I've worked with, for example, and I've known Gabriella for quite some time, actually, quite a number of years now. How have they experimented with synesthetic flavours? Well, in general, my short answer to that is they don't experiment with subjective synesthetic flavours. They try simply to replicate the effect using their skill as chefs to create a nice looking and a nice tasting dish. There are, of course, chefs who experience synesthesia themselves. Gabrielle's one of them. Gabriella, Heston Blumenthal's another, and both of them have used their own synesthesia mainly as a source of inspiration, creative inspiration. Gabriella takes hers a step further, and she's turned cooking into performance art. As far as I'm concerned, it's fantastic to watch. And I think so. I've dealt with a lot of non-synesthetic chefs. One in particular is London-based Joseph Youssef, who some of you may know. He really, I've always considered him an artist in his own right. But people like him, and in his work, in my opinion, base their fantastically creative dishes on cross-modal correspondences and frame it around the word synesthesia. What I like about that is the fact that it teaches patrons how the senses can and do work together. They're getting fed and educated at the same time. And I would say, though, it's an approach that works very well. We've now got a very large number of restaurants in London and the home counties who use cross-modal correspondences to, I suppose, shape the design and ambience of their premises. And they use to great effect things such as textured cutlery to enhance the sensory eating experience. I'm trying to think there. One restaurant in particular I like. They actually serve food in total darkness, and this is almost no outside noises or distractions. So essentially, it just leaves smell as an introduction of things to come. So I think to sort of sum up my view, in my experience, synesthesia per se plays very little part in their creative output, but synesthesia research has certainly supplied them with new ideas and inspirations. Most of them have used that to good effect. So that sort of really sums it up. I mean, what I'd like to do now is I've done a fair bit of work myself, produced some installations. If I can just share the screen. So I did a little PowerPoint recording just probably about an hour ago, so it's quite fresh. I'll just play this to you, and I'll leave it at that. Okay, won't be long. Hello again. I'm just going to quickly scoot through now a few examples of how I've attempted to portray my own sound to taste synesthesia graphically down through the years. This one here was my very first attempt. It was a school project I produced when I was aged 10. I remember handing this project in, which contained a rather basic hand-drawn representation of the Victoria line on the London Underground, with all the station names changed to the flavours they induced. This eventually evolved into the London Underground taste tube map, which came out in 2013, which showed the flavours of all 350 plus stations on the London Underground system. I also created one of these taste maps following a trip to Toronto in Canada. This one was a lot easier. Another installation I created early on was a series of London landmarks, which I exhibited at a deconstructing architecture event at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. And that involved handing out bags of food that represented the flavour and texture of each of the images. There's the Shard there, you've got King's Cross Station, Bank of England, and there's me in situ at the V&A. I then got a newspaper commission to create some election posters for the 2010 UK general elections. So I duly delivered. There's the Liberal Dems, Conservatives and Labour. The newspaper liked it so much they actually asked me to do the same thing for the 2015 general election in the UK, which I duly did. There's Labour, Party of Wales. The following year, I also got a commission from a US publication to do the same for the American general elections in 2016, and this is the result. The next project I did, which I didn't think came out very well, it was an attempt to create a family portrait using food images rather than the subjects themselves. This, as you can see, is quite a nice family portrait, but it actually turned out looking like that, which I think perfectly illustrates the danger of using just synesthetic flavours as an inducer. As I previously mentioned, I've also worked on a number of commercial projects, such as creating 4 new flavours for Pringles. Here's 3 of them here, hip hop's missing. And what we did here was we created flavours that matched a particular music genre. The project I really enjoyed doing was this one, which was for Danone. The company wanted to run a social media campaign called Synaesthesia, giving consumers the opportunity to choose between 3 new flavours of yogurt without actually sampling them. We achieved this by synesthetically translating the 3 flavours into professionally produced music tracks, which the consumers then voted on, with the winner being the one with the tastiest sound. That was the flavour of yogurt they eventually released. Yet another project was for Pizza Express, who actually own their own music label, and they have an active artist portfolio. They wanted the artist's music translating into new pizza flavours to be used to promote the artists on record release day. Now, all of these commercial projects were synesthetically based, but with a hefty dose of cross-modal correspondences thrown in. This made them far more palatable than could ever be achieved by just using my synesthesia alone. So I'll leave you with a short synesthesia ad for Schwartz Spices, which was great fun to do, but somewhat messy to clean up afterwards. And also look out for the 2 pieces of garlic. I think they are banging together. That's a really nice touch. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Well, we see that synesthesia inspires, it amuses, and it sells. Thank you for this talk and a big emphasis on your personal experience, as well as some commercial tricks of the trade. I can't wait to ask you questions, but we will have a better time for it later. Now, I, I'm sincerely delighted to introduce our next speaker, Chan Janice Wang, an associate professor of consumer psychology at the University of Copenhagen. She is an experimental psychologist and computer scientist. Jenny studied at Caltech and MIT, and she obtained her PhD at the University of Oxford with Professor Charles Spence as her supervisor. Jenny studies how environmental aspects like background music, cognitive factors like expertise, knowledge, and expectation can modify the way we perceive food and drink. Janice focuses on how flavor is created in the brain, why people are attracted to certain food, and how to encourage them to develop healthier preferences. Janice has a special professional interest in enology, the science of wine and winemaking. She published abundantly in leading science journals, Chemical Senses, Multisensory Research, Flavor, as well as popular magazines like The Economist, Financial Times, GQ, etc. She worked with museums, such as the British Museum of Food, and she collaborated with companies such as Godiva, Bombas and Park, Crown, Deezer, and many others. Janice is a founding member of cross-modalism movement that seeks to foster full human experience of our sensorial environment through non-traditional interactions, disciplines, ideas, communities. Dr. Wen, I believe our audience is just lasting with curiosity. I think my introduction does you full credit, and we are all ears and mouths to listen to your talk.
Thank you so much, Anton. First of all, thank you, Anton Marina, for inviting me to give this talk. After listening to Gabriella and James's talk, I really feel like this is a super good fit for me to go next. Also, Anton, you pronounced my Chinese name perfectly, which is very impressive. Let me just share my screen. And so you mentioned that I did my PhD with Charles in Oxford. The thing is, I did my PhD on music and flavor interaction. So it was really nice for me to hear both Gabriella and James talk about music and flavor, because usually it's not a topic that people bring up. So I am very excited. I've prepared a short presentation. It should be around 15 minutes. Please feel free to cut me off if I go longer than that. So I hope everyone can see my screen. And so the overview of today's talk. So first, I'm going to talk about cross-modal correspondences. And thank you, James, for doing an introduction for that. I even have a slide where I also try to describe the difference between synesthesia and cross-modal correspondences. So I hope you'll find that satisfactory. So I'll start by talking about what exactly are cross-modal correspondences, this term that keeps on popping up. And then I'll talk about its relationship to flavor, and then I'll end with some examples of dining experiences. So the key idea behind cross-modal correspondences is that these are often surprising general associations that people make between different sensory attributes that might at first seem random. The classic example here is I have two shapes. I have like the roundish shape on the left and angular shape on the right. And then I say, okay, I have two names. One is Kiki, one is Booba. Which name do you think goes with which shape? So unfortunately, I have no idea where the chat window is on here, so I can't ask people, but I would like you all to kind of think about this in your own minds. And then I will spoil the joke by telling you that this kind of study has been repeated over and over again in many different populations, tested in different formats, and the result is always the same, which is that people tend to associate the round shape on the left with booba and the angular shape on the right with kiki. This is even known as the booba-kiki effect. It's kind of like the most common example of cross-modal correspondences. And then I want to give you another example of cross-modal correspondences. This one has to do with shape, so size and pitch. So we have two shapes here. We have a bigger one and a smaller one. And now I will play two sounds. Here's the first one. Oh, sorry. That's the first one. Here's the second sound. So I hope you all have heard the two sounds. The first one is high-pitched and the second one is low-pitched. And I would like you to think about which sound do you think matches with which shape? Now, again, most people will associate the higher pitched sound with the smaller shape and the lower pitched sound with the bigger shape. And this cross-modal correspondence, it's something that's been replicated even in very young infants. So it's an example of a more innate cross-modal correspondence, because cross-modal correspondences really comes in all shapes and sizes, as I will show you later, pun not intended. And some correspondences tend to be more innate than others, and some correspondences tend to be a more learned associative experience. And this is one of the more innate ones. And one of the arguments is that this might have been an evolutionary advantage if you are in a forest and you cannot see the animals, but if you can hear the sound they're making, the argument is if an animal is making a high-pitched sound, they're more likely to be a smaller animal and you don't have to be so afraid. Whereas if it's an animal making a very low-pitched sound, maybe it's a good idea to run away before you see the animal because it could be quite big. So moving on, I would like to show some examples of taste-related cross-modal correspondences. This is the first one. It's very funny because, James, you might recognize this picture. It is actually from the restaurant you mentioned, Kitchen Theory with Chef Joseph Joseph. This is one of his dishes where he serves 4 spoons with 4 different colored spheres. And the waiter tells you, okay, you have 4 different tastes here. You have bitter, salty, sour, and sweet, but you don't know which one is which. And this is a dish that's meant to evoke the diner's creativity, kind of open thinking, to get you to think about which color do you associate with which taste. So please take 5 seconds just to think about which one you think would pair with which taste. And now I will spoil the answer once again. So maybe we start with the most easy one, let's say, or the one that when I ask students, it's the one they most easily make, which is the red one, right? Most people will say the red one is sweet. The green one is meant to be sour, and then the black one is meant to be bitter, and the white one is salty. And this dish was designed with the most common color taste correspondences in the British population, at least. And then, James, you could argue that this is an example of a learned association, that perhaps we don't innately have these color taste associations, but instead, as we're growing up and we're eating different foods with different colors, we start to build up this association. There's another theory that says when it comes to red and green, this might be an evolutionary advantage because red fruits indicates that they're ripe. This is only a theory. My supervisor, Charles Spence, kind of thinks this is not necessarily always the case, but anyways, that's another story. So moving on, this has also been mentioned before, this kind of shape-taste correspondence. Again, I have the same booba-kiki shape. Most people will tend to associate the round shape with sweet and the angular shape with sour. And now diving into something that's a bit more close to home to what I did for my PhD. I specialized in sound taste correspondences. And it's really funny, some of the things that Gabriella was saying. For example, high pitch she thought was lemon and low pitch was bitter. Well, this is what she mentioned was actually quite a common general sound taste correspondence that has been uncovered through multiple research studies. So what I will do now, again, this is for you to think about, is I have 4 different sounds that's all been created by researchers. Each sound was made to be associated with one specific taste. So I will play the 4 sounds. Each one will be about 5 seconds, and I want you to think about which sound goes with which taste. So here's the first one. And here's the second. I like to play that one in class because it wakes all the students up. This is the third one. And finally, the fourth. Okay, so those were the 4 sounds. And for the sake of time, I will just show you this table. So this table generalizes a lot of different research that's been done over the years, looking at how people associate basic tastes with specific sound parameters like tempo, articulation, harmony, and pitch. So now if I play all the sounds again, here's the first one. So you might have noticed this was quite a high pitch. It was consonant. It was quite slow, and it was not maybe as legato as it could be, but that's associated with sweetness. And here's the second one. So hearing the sound sometimes make my mouth water. This one is associated with sour. And the third one is the most tricky. And full disclosure, I have published a paper in multisensory research just to focus on the sound of saltiness, because you can see here, everything is average except for articulation, and people tend to associate saltiness with staccato, this very rhythmic sound. But yeah, salty is difficult. And finally, the fourth one. So this was created to be associated with bitterness. It's slow, it's legato, it's very dissonant, and it's also notably the only sound that's really associated with low pitch. So at this point, I just want to make a small comment about cross-modal correspondences versus synesthesia, like James mentioned. I think I would agree with James when he said that synesthesia people tend to perceive more intensely. So for me, cross-modal correspondences are something that could be quite intuitive. People could answer very quickly, but the difference is you don't. So, for example, when they hear the music, they don't necessarily taste the actual taste in their mouth like Gabriella might. Whereas in synesthesia, at least the traditional definition of synesthesia, you have to have a sensory concurrent happening at the same time. So for people with color grapheme synesthesia, when they see the letters, they really see the colors on top of the letters. It's not just you make an association. And the other quite classic definition of cross-modal correspondences is that these tend to be shared by at least a large percentage of the population, whereas synesthesia tends to be more idiosyncratic and individual. That said, I have been to synesthesia conferences where people have discussed commonalities in at least color grapheme synesthesia, whereas it tends to develop after people have learned the alphabet, and in the letter A tends to be associated with colors like red and orange. So there's some thought that maybe synesthesia also comes with some prior learning that helps to shape it. So it's still quite an active maybe topic of research, but at least for my own definition, I think cross-modal correspondences tend to be commonly shared, whereas synesthesia is more specialized, and more importantly, synesthesia, for me at least, should come with a sensory concurrent where you are actually experiencing the second sense. Okay, so now I want to take a brief moment to talk about what exactly is flavor, because we've been talking about smells, we've been talking about tastes. So I study flavor perception, and flavor is a construct that, well, if you ask different researchers, they will tell you different definitions as to what exact sensory modalities make up flavor. For me, flavor is made up of all the senses. It is both smell and taste, and especially touch. So flavor we perceive in the mouth when we chew up the food. The volatile compounds in the food gets volatilized and goes up to the nose. So we're smelling the food we have in the mouth, but it is attributed to coming from the mouth based on the touch of the food. At the same time, hearing the sound of the food could impact flavor. For example, humans are actually not very good at texture perception. So to tell, for example, how crunchy something is, we often rely on the sense of hearing. And also before we even eat the food, just seeing the food helps us form flavor identities of what we're about to eat, because it all comes down to expectations. I'm not going to go into detail, but this view of flavor perception is very much in line with the, let's say, the most trendy theory of neuroscience, which is predictive coding. So, which is to say that the brain tries to, let's say, fast track its processing as much as possible. So before we eat something, we try to form an expectation of what we're eating as fast as possible. And some of these things, like this, the smell, the sight, even the sound of the food or the sound of the background, all of these things help to make a prediction of what we're about to eat. So here's another example of that. So how do the senses contribute to final product perception? First, we have the classical view, which is that flavor, for example, coming from the spoon of yogurt, is coming from the sound of the food, the mouthfeel, the taste, and also retronasal olfaction. So this kind of smelling in the mouth. But then on top of that, we also have these expectation effects that can come from orthonasal olfaction. So what you get from the nostrils, what you see, what you hear, and maybe what you touch with the hands. Because, for example, I can have the same yogurt when it's served on the spoon, but depending on the packaging, for example, I could have very different expectations, and actually, because of that, very different sensory perceptions of what I'm eating. So I want to show some examples of how cross-modal correspondences can actually affect this formation of the flavor concept in the mind. The first is an example of color, but I'm not talking about the color of the food. We've seen that already. I'm talking about the color of the plates. So this was an example of a strawberry mousse, the same strawberry mousse that was served on either a white plate or a black plate. This was a study that was done at the Cross-Modal Research Lab together with the Abuli Foundation. And in this study, what they found was that the same strawberry mousse tasted more intense and sweeter and was more liked when it was served on a white plate compared to a black one. And again, the food was exactly the same. What was changed was the servingware. Going back to the round and angular associations, this was an example to show that even the typeface on the label could have an effect on perceived tastes. So here we have an example of typeface that were used in this study for a candy packaging. People then ate the candy afterwards. Some of the typefaces made people think the candy tasted sweeter, and then some of the typefaces made people think the candy tasted more sour. And you can have a think about which one you thought with which. Basically, again, round typeface people associated with more sweet, and then the angular typeface with more sour in this case. And then something that was really at the heart of my PhD study, this effect of sonic seasoning, which is the effect where listening to specific soundtracks, could people not only associate tastes with the soundtrack, but the fact of listening to the soundtrack could actually influence your flavor evaluation. So this was the first study that was done on the sonic seasoning. People heard two soundtracks. This was the first one. might be very familiar. It was the bitter one, and this is the second one. So with the two soundtracks, listening to the bitter soundtrack made people think that this toffee candy was more on the bitter side, and listening to the sweet one made people think it tasted more on the sweet side. As part of my PhD, I investigated the different mechanisms by which this could happen. You can read my 400-page PhD thesis if anybody is interested. I want to show one other example, and I think Gabriella mentioned the music of mole. For my PhD thesis, I actually conducted a study together with a restaurant in Nashville called Edge, and also with an audio branding agency, IV, where we wanted to make a spicy soundtrack. To cut things short, I will give you a taste of what our spicy soundtrack ended up being. So I'll stop that for now. It was like a whole 90-second soundtrack. We then ran a series of studies to test first whether people associate the soundtrack with spiciness. The answer was yes. And secondly, whether eating something while listening to the soundtrack can actually enhance your perception of spiciness. And the answer there was, it depends. It does not work if you're eating something that is not spicy at all. The music does work, however, if you're eating something that's already somewhat spicy. So, we're not Jesus. We can't make wine out of water, but we can maybe make the wine taste a little bit more fruity depending on the wine. And then I want to mention an example with touch, because we've been only talking about vision and hearing. So in this case, I did a study where I made people touch either a piece of velvet or a piece of sandpaper while tasting a sweet wine. And what we found was that depending on what you touched, it influenced the perceived sweetness and pleasantness of the wine. So, and this was, it was not a port, but it was a port style fortified sweet wine. So in this case, touching the velvet made the wine taste sweeter compared to touching the sandpaper. And finally, to close off my presentation, I want to give some examples of the use of these associations in gastronomy. I know that, James, you've mentioned the fat duck already. Unfortunately, maybe I have some examples from the fat duck. The first one is playing with the fact that people tend to associate colors with flavor identities. This is in the fat duck cookbook. It's the beetroot and orange jelly. The fun thing is that when you serve the dish, it looks like this. People tend to think, oh, the red one is the beet, the orange one is the orange. But in fact, the recipe uses golden beets and blood orange. So it creates a fun disconfirmation of expectations effect. So this is an example with vision. The second example is probably the most famous dish coming out of the fat duck, the Sound of the Sea, that was developed in conjunction with Charles in Oxford many years ago. So the idea is that you're served a dish that looks like a beach, and then now this is very old-fashioned, you got a seashell with an iPod inside with these headphones. And this is not exactly the same sound, but it's something similar. You will hear the sound of the sea with the seagulls or some children playing in the background. And this is a dish that has reportedly made some journalists cry, because you get this very vivid experience of actually being somewhere else. Or at least this was, when I tried the dish at the restaurant, I really felt like I was transported to another place. And this is examples also going up in terms of conceptual complexity for me. So this was a dish that was developed when the restaurant revamped in 2015 with the new kind of storytelling menu. The dish was called Bedtime Off to the Land of Nod. And a fun story with this dish is that I actually fell asleep eating it. Well, no, I fell asleep after eating it. Because this was like, I don't even know, the course 15 or something in a very long tasting menu. And maybe the dish was so soothing that I did fall asleep. But the point I wanted to show with this dish is not quite what was in the dish, but rather the spoon. So to reinforce this idea of relaxation and sleeping, I really like the fact that they put this really fuzzy white handle on the spoon. So when you were tasting these very soft, gentle flavors of, for example, lavender, you also felt this on your hand. I thought that was a really nice touch. And finally, to round off, I wanted to make a pitch for the work that we did when we were still doing very active cross-modalist movements. So when I was doing my PhD, I was also working with some chefs, some perfumer and pianists on this series of multisensory performances. For example, this is one that we were quite famous for. It was an edible painting where two of our chefs would make an edible painting based on ingredients, and then everybody afterwards would go up. Well, sorry, they were making the painting while Chris, the pianist, was playing a piece of music, so everything was supposed to influence each other. And then afterwards, everybody from the audience would go up and eat the painting, so it was this very communal aspect. And in fact, Gabriella mentioned perfume concert, and I just wanted to show this. We have actually also done different forms of perfume concerts. This one was at my college in Oxford, where you have Chris, the pianist, and we had different ways of disseminating the perfume throughout the audience. We had a perfumer, Najib, who was working with us, and in this case, the perfume was disseminated through this big cloth, and Najib had made custom perfumes to go with each piece of music. So I wanted to show that. So yes, that's my presentation. Thank you, and I'm sure there will be questions.
Janice, thank you very much. That was very interesting and very rich. I'm sure yes, we'll have a lot of questions. I have at least. So I'm gonna start the Q&A session now, and we typically started by giving an opportunity first to our speakers to comment on each other talks or maybe ask each other questions. So James and Janice, if you want to do that, please go ahead. And in the meantime, everyone else, if you have a question, you can either type a question in the chat and I'll introduce you and I'll ask you to ask your question, or just raise your virtual hand and I'll invite you to ask your question.
Can I ask, where is the chat? I can't find a chat box.
Yeah, so it's can you see the different symbols at the top of the screen? So you have raise, react, people, and there's a chat
Not
to the
for
left.
me.
I don't see it either.
There's no chat.
Okay, yeah, that's a pity. Anyway, if someone else has access to the chat, I'll be monitoring it for you, so no worries.
So James, I feel like I've tried to answer some of your points during my talk. I don't know if you have other questions, and I'm sure you know, Charles. So.
Yeah, I've actually taken part in those sonic seasoning sessions, and they are fantastic, and it does work. It's really, really impressive. Yeah, I just want to thank you for clearing up. I mean, I don't know that much about cross modality. It's something that I came across probably no further than 10 years ago. I'd never, heard it expressed in that way, so I was a bit of a novice on that. But the point I was trying to make was the synesthetic experience to me just overrides all of that. And he overrode it in some of Charles's experiments that he did on me a few years ago. But it does work, and fantastic. And thank you for clarifying cross modalities place in all of this. I mean, the only reason I do it is simply to make it more palatable for the ad creatives, because at the end of the day, we're both trying to work for each other, and I place a lot of emphasis on that. And so far, by introducing cross modality, and I'll introduce it even more now, I've listened to this, it's made it even clearer. So thank you.
Yeah, I really like the fact that you said you use both, right? You have your own synesthesia, plus you have the cross-modal correspondences to make it more widely applicable. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, just it's a very simple thing. I mean, I've done a lot of reverse engineering as well, which is creating images from tastes, which is quite difficult to do because you have to sort of replicate the image somehow and reverse engineer it. But that's an interesting project inside as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add on that point, and then maybe we open to questions. So I do a lot of wine tasting, and I teach people about wine. I'm a Master of Wine student. And often when it comes to wine communication, it's very difficult for people to describe when what they're tasting. And I've been playing a lot with, can we use metaphors to help people describe what they're tasting? So based on images, colors, sounds, you know, if this wine were a person, what kind of person would they be? What kind of personalities would they have? So I think this is a really rich area of using either modal correspondences or synesthesia, whatever, just to help people, you know, communicate what they're tasting.
Thank you. Cici, do you have a question? Please go ahead.
I do, and of course, this is the moment that my dogs are going to bark. So my question, is a question and a bit of a comment, and directed to you, my friend James, but also maybe Anton and Chan. You can all help answer this question. James, I know you as a gustatory synesthete. And my own experience with synesthesia is that I've had fleeting moments of gustatory synesthesia, and they have risen up as being some of the most dramatic synesthetic experiences I've had. And so, James, do you have other synesthesias? And is your gustatory synesthesia sort of the so dominant it makes the others pale in comparison? And
No,
and
sorry.
and Anton, is this something that happens where one synesthesia becomes so prominent that the others sort of fade? So maybe James first.
Well, in my case, no. I do have another kind of synesthesia. I do see bright flashes of light. Probably not so much shapes, but more like firework displays. That happens quite a lot, and it affects my peripheral vision as well. But that's the only other kind I have, and it's a bit like being caught by surprise. It's as though something physical's happening there. That's the way I've always thought of it. But you know, when I do think about it, it happens in the strangest situations, which can't be caused by physical things. But that's the only one I have. The taste synesthesia doesn't override it. Definitely doesn't. In fact, one feeds the other, because when I do see, because I do get some tastes from colours, and I don't know whether that's my brain. It's like you mentioned blue plates, and I've sat there as well, because whenever I have food served on a blue plate, I get an inky kind of taste that manifests itself, and it's in the back, you know, right at the back there, very, 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 very faint, but it's still there. And I've never quite understood where that's come from, because my most prominent type of synesthesia is the lexical part of it, because word sounds produce the most dramatic synesthetic sensations, far more than ambient sound, although ambient sound does.
Was it a question to me? Because, well, I don't know the right answer. Well, probably I know which way to look for the right answer. And my idea is that in synesthetes, judgment doesn't overtake, but categorization comes first. So you need to really see the hierarchy of processing. So hierarchies processing is more complex, I would emphasize this, in synesthetes, because a judgment comes later, but prejudgment and categorization comes first. And you need to look for the right answer right within this type of processing in synesthetes. Yeah, that's all that I can say, well, because I see no research and no research results.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Sorry, someone is typing. Can you please mute yourself because we can hear it. Okay, so Michael has a question. Michael, please go ahead. Sorry, you're muted.
I have muted Michael. I'm sorry. I will unmute him.
Oh, okay.
Right in the beginning of the. I'm sorry, Michael. You may go on now.
Okay, yes, in this case it's difficult. I did not recognize that I have to unmute myself at the second step. Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for this very nice presentations. I have a question for Janice. You mentioned that you think that the taste is very strongly related to expectations, which are made up with the other senses. If I experience, one example, I experience vegetables in China or Japan, which are not common here in Germany and or Europe. I cannot find them even in Japanese restaurants. So you have a different feeling in the mouth, you have a different look, and you have a different taste. So if I experience such unknown food for the first time, is there, can you give the standpoint from the psychological view? Is this a different type of processing, whether I'm eating something I don't know compared to something I have known before?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would maybe compare to the experience of if you go to one of these eating in the dark restaurants that was mentioned, where it's completely black and you can't see what you're eating, in which case you're also removing
I know that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very often we have a natural response of fear, to put it that way, if it's something we don't know. And that's because you can imagine the mouth as like a last line of defense before you either take the food into your body, which could either be good for you or it could harm you. So that's why we're very cautious. And this is also why we try as much as possible to predict what the flavor tastes like. It's a good question about whether there's a true blank slate, or whether even if it's something you haven't had before, you would try to make associations based on what might be even somewhat similar to you. So if I think in any case, there is going to be an element of uncertainty, and that also comes with some degree of caution, if not outright fear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, at least when it comes to children, often they say if you're introducing an unfamiliar food to kids, you should serve it in a familiar format. So at least there is something you can latch onto and it's not completely foreign. And maybe this is why going to dining in the dark restaurants can be very thrilling for some people, because there is this sense of fear and danger. So I hope that has somewhat answered your question.
Yeah, my experience of the dark restaurant is that it's more intense, very interesting for me. But sometimes I had difficulties to distinguish very different food. For example, some sort of vegetable and some sort of meat. So I was guessing, oh, that is maybe a vegetable, or no, maybe it's lamb meat or so, and it's very interesting. Some very new experiences there.
I think it goes to show how much we rely on our sense of vision to really for flavor identification. And also, I'm not surprised that the food tastes more intense, because you are focusing a lot more attention on what you're eating than you normally would. And also there's no visual distraction, so that you're really focusing on the taste.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next question is from Sean. Sean, please go ahead.
Hope that you can see me. See me in here? Okay. I'm just wanting to sort of reiterate and go on a bit more with something that James and Janice already mentioned, which is that, okay, regarding cross-modal correspondences as compared to synesthesia, okay, cross-modal correspondences are learned, usually at a very young age. Like what? You can see cross-modal correspondences being shown, with children in the first or second year or such. Okay, and as mentioned, there might even be some cross-modal correspondences which are innate. It's a sort of inborn or such. Okay, now synesthetes, all synesthetes grow up in at least one culture. Some are multicultural, multilinguistic, which means that all synesthetes learn at least one set of cross-modal correspondences. And then the thing is that those cross-modal correspondences might conflict later on with their synesthesia. And I've given this example beforehand, but I'll give a brief example again. It's like one of my favorite examples is using jelly beans. Let's go back to food. Right? I have flavor to color synesthesia. Different flavors make me see different colors. Okay, so right, it's like jelly beans or lollipops or lifesaver candies or something like that. Okay, right? I grew up in the U.S. Midwest, right? Okay, so there, by the time that you're like 3 or 4 years old, you learn that a yellow candy, that's going to taste like lemon. Red tastes like cherry, right? Purple tastes like grape. Okay, so you get it right. So yellow equals lemon. But I've also got flavor to color synesthesia. The flavor of lemon makes me see blue. The flavor of cherry makes me see dark black. So I say yellow equals lemon equals blue. Right? Right? And it's right. And now at my age, I still know that if the candy is yellow, it's going to taste like lemon. Right? So which is going to make me see blue. Right? So you're dealing. You could be dealing all your life with that conflict of, okay, it's like, right, working the yellow against the blue, working the red against the black. And that does seem to be something that James also experiences with his, it's like working the cross-modal associations against the synesthesia. Because you're not going to, a synesthete is not going to get away from the cross-modal associations. It's just a matter of what you do with those cross-modal associations against your synesthesia. You know, I'll shut up. I'll shut up with that.
Thank you. Does anyone want to comment on that?
I think that's a super interesting example. So Sean, does that just make you really confused when you're eating? Like, how do you deal with that conflict?
Okay. But I got over the confusion. I'm 60 something years old. I got over that confusion decades ago, right? But it still does every once in a while interfere with things, and it's like another example. Right? Okay. The flavor of milk makes me see blue, right? So I go to a grocery store, and I just automatically want to grab milk that is that's packaged in a blue carton, but that's not the type of milk that I want. Right? The type of milk that I want is in the green carton, but milk is blue, so I have to stop myself and say no, get the green carton, right? But likewise, I almost always if ice cream is packaged in a carton that has blue on it, I'll just automatically just grab that. If coffee is packaged in something that has green, predominantly green, I'll grab that green packaged coffee, even if it's a flavor I don't want. So,
got it. Yeah. So you have to consciously override that. So
you have to stop and think.
So speaking of milk and color, I'm Canadian. I used to live in the States, and then I moved to the UK for my PhD. In the US and the UK, the milk coloring and how much fat it represents is completely the opposite. And this drives me crazy because red in the States means it's whole fat milk, but in the UK it means it's skim milk. And so I still feel confused when I'm looking at milk in different countries, and I feel like maybe it's almost like your condition where you have this one set of like learned associations from an early age, and then you're constantly having to use logic to override that.
Stop yourself and say no.
Exactly. You have to think about it.
Yeah.
That's also my experience that there are conflicts between synthetic colors and associative or correspondent colors, and I have taken this also from many talks to other synesthetes, so I am quite sure that synesthesia or synesthetic connections are additions to cross-modal correspondences. So I think I've never met any synesthete who has not any correspondences of those common correspondences. I think this is quite similar, but these synesthetic colors can be an addition, and that can make some conflicts. But for me personally, also I'm aware of that, and during a longer time, I learned to handle that anyway, like Sean does.
While we are on the topic of synesthesia and cross-modal correspondences, Janice, how would you comment the following idea? We often get rid of the subject in our research. And if you take the paradigm of embodied research in cognitive science, you see that some inferences are taken not from the outside or from the experience, but from the subject themselves. And when you gave this example of big in low pitch tone and small in high pitch tone. So can it be not learned and not innated, but somewhere in between? It's like self-reference. How would I do it? And you make a deduction that probably this is high and this is low without any outside experience.
That is a really fascinating question, to which I do not have an answer. I'm sorry. Cross-modal correspondences, it's still, I would say it's still a developing field. And James, you mentioned that you haven't really heard about it until 10 years ago. And that's because Charles wrote this very famous classic tutorial paper on cross-modal correspondences in 2011, where he tried to define what it was. Fun fact, last November, I organized a workshop with Charles and also with Carlos Velasco, who we were in the lab at the same time, a little bit. We literally had a whole morning's debate on the definition of cross-modal correspondences. And we couldn't really agree on the difference between that and just associations. And also cross-modal correspondences have so many different ways that they can form. And I don't think they have been really investigated properly. So I don't know if I can answer this question, Anton, about this self-referential way of learning that's somewhat in between the two. Please write Charles Spence and ask him this question. I think he would love to answer.
Thank you. Yeah, I will definitely.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. We're really running out of time. Marina has a question. Marina, if this is a very brief question, then go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Just thank you very much, James. It was very interesting to get more answers for questions. Question is, how long, James, you experience these names, these linguistic, not associations, but what you experience? I mean, is it one-time emotion, or it's just always with you? Is it appearing here, or you feel it in your body?
Well, the synesthetic taste actually produce a mouthfeel, which is the thing that's always fascinated me. How the hell does it convince my brain I'm actually eating something? But there's volume, temperature, and all sorts involved there. Sorry, I forgot what was the question again?
How long actually
How long?
this feeling is with you?
Right.
Just once I was eating foie gras, and then it was just flesh inside. The second
Yeah.
time, again, it's about recognizing the products. I didn't have it anymore, but I didn't recognize first time that it was foie gras. Then with chocolate, the same. But then I never have this feeling again. But I remember this color. Therefore, the question is, yeah, how often will you always see this burger taste when you read something?
Yes. It's the actual experience itself is very, very similar to a fluorescent light going on and going off again. It comes on in a flash. It's a bit like an eyedropper of taste. It's always on a specific specific place in my mouth. It could be on the left side, right, and down the middle. But it's always there, and it's just, and then goes away again. The thing about my synesthesia is that the unpleasant synesthetic perceptions are caused not by the actual taste of what I'm tasting, because some things I taste and I quite like it. It's the actual intensity of that. As Sean mentioned there, having to deal with these conflicts, that's exactly what I've done. And I've managed to, as an adult, exactly like Sean, when you put in adult situations and you have to deal with things like that, you've learned to deal with the conflict. And that's what it is. It's always a conflict. That's why going into a restaurant is such an ordeal for me. Usually 20 minutes is my limit and I have to leave to feel comfortable anyway. But it's a fairly intense sensation, but it does fade either very quickly if it's relatively weak, or it sticks around for a bit longer if it's a strong one. And they're always been the same. I've got documented evidence of my taste from when I was 5 years old, because that's when I started writing them down. My mum didn't know what the hell they were, but that was when she was saying, "What? Why have you put that word next to that? Badly spelt." Just referring to taste, but they've never ever changed. Never changed. And nor is the intensity of them. Some words are really intense, and they still are, always have been.
Thank you very much for this. So we are now, I'm gonna invite Cici Hart, the Secretary of the International Association of Synesthetes Artists and Scientists, to give some concluding remarks. Cici, please go ahead.
Sure, I'm going to keep this very short because I know that we're over time at this point. But the International Association of Synesthetes Artists and Scientists is delighted to have this opportunity to pair with University of St. Andrews for this series of art and conversation talks. It's been delightful to see all of our different presenters. We're grateful for this as an organization that is very much rooted in the pairing of science and art. And we're grateful for your work, Marina, for everything that Anton has done to make this work and so beautifully across different domains of the synesthesia community. Thank you to our presenters today. James, you were, as always, just delightful. I feel like I could talk with you for hours. I want to know more and more every time I hear you speak. Chan, lovely to hear your talk also. I want to send you an email about something that I think would be interesting to you. And I wish Gabriela was able to join us in person, but the film was outstanding. I also wanted to thank really quickly Brendan Wolf at the School of Divinity for his contributions to creating these talks, and Dr. Francesca Borga. And that's really it. IASIS is grateful to have this opportunity, and hopefully we can do something like this again soon.
Okay, Cici, thank you so much for this warm and really inspiring concluding remarks. This would be it. Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you, James and Janice. Sad to say, the seminar concludes our synesthesia series. It has been a unique opportunity to collaborate with the University of St. Andrews. I join in all these thank yous expressed today. And Marina, thank you very much for co-organizing, for the creative aspects, technical aspects. In the world of synesthesia, words become flavors, colors turn into melodies, and ideas become experiences. We appreciate your sense of wonder and engagement. And thank you very much, and see you elsewhere.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye. See you soon.